What's up, everybody? Thank you for watching Savant Obsession today. We have a really special guest, Michael Christensen. He's been doing big things in the Utah community, and I really want to let him talk about his current adventure, which is a nonprofit, and you're also a director.
Yeah. So the nonprofit we do, and I guess that's my camera there, we do the monthly trash pickup days in the Davis and Salt Lake counties. And basically what we're trying to do is give the general public in that area some kind of low stakes, easy to do volunteer opportunities. So we've designed these volunteer opportunities specifically to cater to the needs of volunteers. So they're very easy. Again, they're like trash pickup. We do food drives in the winter also. So we're actually in the midst of some food drives now until March. But yeah, that's pretty much the goal, is just to do small, easy to do volunteer days for the general public, Davis and Salt Lake counties, and just to kind of scale. You know, we would like to do more events. We're just kind of growing. So yeah, so that's pretty much the goal there, some kind of the meat and potatoes, I guess you could say. But as far as directing stuff, I'm into filmmaking also. So I like science fiction, comedy, dark comedy, and yeah.
Okay. So before we dive into like kind of what inspired you on your journey, what gave you the idea for what you're doing? Like what was the inspiration for doing these trash days and doing these types of events?
Well, the trash pickup day specifically was chosen because it's something that's kind of easy for someone who doesn't want to get too involved or doesn't have the time to get too involved in a nonprofit organization in kind of more like a specialized task. So a trash pickup day is something that anybody can kind of do. But kind of going a little deeper than that, the idea to want to do nonprofit work and do civic engagement, that kind of springs out of a general sense that people should be more involved in their community, but it's not always easy to know how to do that. And it's not always, and if you do know how to do it, there's not a lot of time to do it. So I have been in the nonprofit world since about 2010, and I've, experienced, I worked with volunteers quite a bit over the years, and it just really seemed like there was a need for kind of a volunteer opportunity that's sort of between a volunteer opportunity that serves somebody who is kind of between not knowing anything about the nonprofit world and then being more involved in the nonprofit world. So a trash pickup day is like something, again, I've said this like 4 times, you can do if you don't have much experience with volunteering and you just want something one-off, but it's not quite as intense as like booth sitting at a nonprofit event where you have to kind of know a lot about the nonprofit, or serving in kind of like a managerial capacity at a special event of some kind, which are all very important volunteer opportunities, but they require more of a commitment and more of a orientation. So our nonprofit is really trying to focus in on kind of that middle area, between, I have an hour on Saturday to go volunteer, so I'm going to go do that. So.
Okay. And so you're basically trying to act as the stepping stone into people being able to specialize in certain activities. So it's
exactly that.
Yeah, so if you were like for me, I have a specialized skill of cutting hair.
Mm-hmm.
So I could go to a nonprofit event and provide that skill.
Yeah.
Where you're trying to make it so whether you're little, tiny, big, tall, you can at least put your foot in the door and experience it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so on these trash pickup days, like, what do you do?
Yeah, so the basic thing is just we go pick up trash, and but generally speaking, we'll have me, because I'm still a very small team, but experimenting with interns, and we have experimented with interns, but we're kind of slowly growing. But what we would do is I would go out there and we would plant our flag, put out our, because we actually have like a little banner that people can kind of come and see, so it's easy to see from a distance. But I guess even before that, what we would do is we would find a park location. So this is all kind of public area. Find a park location, go out there, put our flag out, put our trash picker uppers out there and little neon vests and that whole thing. And people will just come out. They'll grab their implements, and then they will go out there and volunteer, for an hour or so. And the thing is, because this is from the perspective of the volunteer, we don't have like a trash goal. Your bag doesn't have to be like of a certain size in terms of how much trash you've put in there, and you can technically you can do whatever you want, but obviously it's cooler if you stay the full hour. But we've had people show up and stay for about 10 minutes and then head out for whatever reasons, because it's none of our business why they come or why they leave. But yeah, that's all fine too, and so it's pretty easy going. So it really is just kind of meant for the person who has an hour or so to spare. But in that particular case, we would just pick up trash for the hour. And we have a few, like, what would you call it, like little do's and don'ts, or, watch out for, like, sharp objects, or if you have kids or something, make sure that you watch them and don't go near roadways and that kind of thing. But other than that, it's pretty plug and play kind of thing.
Okay, and so you're trying to basically do what we should do already, which is keep our public areas more upkept and less dirty.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of, if you don't mind, that kind of puts my mind in a couple of directions. So first thing is that our Parks and Recs, the Parks and Recs teams at the city, they generally do a very good job, picking up trash. But the reality is it doesn't matter if you're picking up trash as a Parks and Recs person like 4 times a day. There's just always litter there. Like I was talking to one gentleman who worked with the city who was mowing the lawn, and he saw me out there picking up trash, and it was one of our volunteer days, and he said, thanks for doing that. I just, said, you're welcome, and I understand that you guys are doing a terrific job, but there's no way to keep on top of this. Like, this is kind of a community thing, and really their main focus is always going to be like the bigger, kind of more dangerous trash, but there really is a strong niche for the general community to participate, or a niche need, but someone, a need for the general public to participate. The other thing that I was kind of thinking of, this just happened this last year, is there was a guy who came out, and he was a younger fellow. I think he's right out of high school, but he started doing his own trash pickup days that weren't at all affiliated with what we were doing. And so I just thought that was kind of a cool example of someone who, came out and liked what we were doing, but was already kind of on his own similar trajectory, but maybe, sensed that we had a way of doing it that was working with what he was doing. But anyway, it was just cool to see that, that something that we were doing, kind of inspired, but sort of just helped kind of push him in his own direction. So, yeah, so so to answer your point, or to address your point, yeah, we are trying to do things that people should generally be doing, and I think that other people are kind of also doing that on their own too. So that's cool. So
I like that. And what's the name of your nonprofit again?
Yeah, we're called Go Unite.
Okay. And what inspired that name?
That's a good question. So we officially became a nonprofit back in 2022, but we've been doing stuff since like 2014. And so in 2014, I wish there was a simple answer for this, but it's just kind of, it's like a rolling process in my mind. So I kind of have to tell the story a little bit. It's not a story, but there's just a sequence of facts. But we were experimenting with gamification, kind of like before Pokemon Go came out. We were interested in, I'm not sure if everyone remembers what Pokemon Go is. It's huge, and it's, there it is. But before that came out, we had a little kind of a team of people that did nonprofit projects, and we were, some business people, nonprofit people, and just kind of, we like to kind of riff on ideas. But we wanted to do kind of a gamification sort of thing, but for civic engagement and community involvement. So, for example, rather than going to catch a Pokemon, you go and like clean up the park somewhere. And so we were kind of already in the headspace of games, and we had like a board game and all that kind of thing. But we had kind of the name that one of us came up with was Catalyst Kingdom, which again kind of like a board game kind of thing. But then Pokemon Go came out, and then I thought, well, I think that's, I kind of like that name a little bit, so I'd kind of like to pull that a little bit. Hopefully, it's not just thieving, but it was just kind of I thought it was kind of a cool thing, and it's a different lane a little bit. So that's kind of where it came from, is we were in the space of gamification and community stuff, and I liked the name Pokemon Go, so Go Unite came Go Unite. So it came from like a list of like 50 names, and that was one that stuck, and it was one that had been chosen because it bore some similarity to something that was kind of out there. So
Yeah, and I really like that you're trying to allow people to have fun doing something that maybe a lot of people would think is tedious. Like,
yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah,
because it's not tedious. Like if you're outside and it's good weather and you're enjoying the day, and you're with a community, like it's not tedious. But like, I know a lot of people out there have a hard time even like cleaning their room.
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Just because life, right? And so trying to allow people to have fun and community while you take care of your community is a great idea. And I would definitely like to, once this year, so we have one of our locations is in Bountiful.
Okay.
So it'd be fun to kind of gamify one of your days.
Yeah.
Where we could donate like free haircut cards for like families, right?
That's phenomenal. Yeah.
And then it's like, hey, the first 5 people to get 2 bags get 4 free haircut cards, and then the first 20 people to get a full bag get another card or whatever. But we could definitely do something like that if you guys were interested.
I'm so interested. I'm like chomping at the bit. Yeah, I think that'd be awesome.
And then I have some other friends that like might be interested in being a part of that too, so that'd be cool. Because for me, what I've noticed with my career is your community is what allows you to survive and thrive, and it also is what builds you. So if you don't take care of your community, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
I feel like, especially in an entrepreneurial world and capitalist world, it's a beautiful thing, but it can be really bad. Like you can just try and take and take and take and take and take, and the reality is it's like if you don't do anything for the planet and for humanity with your success, there's no point, because you're supposed to leave a legacy that's positive, not a negative legacy in life. And that's just my opinion, but
no, I'm very much with you. Like I'm not at all anti-free market, I get kind of a stickler with terminology. Like I could talk all day about my own opinions about what's a free market, what's capitalism. But generally speaking, I think, like for example, I think it's phenomenal that you have a business, and not only a business, but you're scaling it. I think that's, having worked a little bit in administration, that's a very difficult thing. And the fact that you're doing that, I think, is great. There's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the community. It's, I guess, you're kind of focused on your lane, and I'm kind of focused on my lane, but it's all kind of the community. But I think you are pointing to something right, which is the, volunteerism and picking up trash and, giving gift cards for people and creating these things. That's creating a type of community that is kind of lacking a little bit, and that does need to be, built up and encouraged. So,
yeah, definitely, especially so I'm 28.
Okay.
And
good year.
Yeah, I like it. I'm not too young, but I'm not too old yet. I can
Yeah.
still move around. You know.
Well, I'm like a decade older, but I can still kind of move around.
Yeah, right. And
Although if I eat like candy, I can feel it in my kneecaps the next day. So
oh yeah, I like that. And so
I don't.
yeah, no, like I like that the perspective of that. Like, but do you feel like with your experience in life, by doing things as a community, because the thing is you don't have to get along with everybody, but you have to be able to come together.
Yeah, that's a hard one. That's a great, we could talk all day about that. I mean, it's because we all need to be able to come together in kind of like the spiritual sense that you're talking about, but there are very real, I'm not like trying to run for office or anything, but there are very real differences that might prevent people from getting along. So it is, so hopefully things like what we're doing and, services like what you're providing and kind of the energy of wanting to get involved in community things, these are like general services that serve everybody. They're not tribalistic. So that's a big topic. Yeah.
Okay, I really like that. So before we get too far into the current,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of inspired your life path? Like, were you always doing community things, or were you, when, let's say around 18, like, when did you start to decide, like, what you wanted your life to be like in the future?
I think, well, to start out, I was raised in the Mormon church, like many people in Utah. And that, I think, gave me just a general sense that there is like this doesn't necessarily seem this way for people who are not LDS or Mormon, but from the perspective of someone who's in the Mormon church, it feels like there's just a general default community. Kind of like how there's always just a library and there's always a police office and there's always like a city county building. It's like there's always a church. There's always a place where you can go and kind of talk in front of a bunch of people and stuff. And I guess as I kind of, deviated from the church a little bit, or left, or just stopped going, however you want to say it, it really became obvious to me that that's not a taken for granted general part of the community. Like the Mormon church does all kinds of volunteer, opportunities and services, but if you're not Mormon, that doesn't mean a hill of beans, because it's, it's not your community, so it doesn't. So, I guess to kind of choose my words carefully, I don't feel like what I'm doing is religious, so to speak, but I think it's trying to generalize a service that you might have if you were in a religion, I guess. It's a non-secular, it's a very secular community thing. So I think kind of my leaving the church kind of put me on a path, the Mormon church kind of put me on a path of like, how do I kind of replicate this? And this is all me analyzing my past self. Like at the time, I didn't necessarily think about it this way, and then I think I got another kind of kick in this particular direction when I got involved in college. I went to a semester of sociology. Like I wanted to be a sociologist. I loved the topic, but I didn't like the school, and so I left. And so a lot of my thinking about a community in kind of a broader sociological sense is is kind of informed by that a little bit.
Okay, yeah. And speaking on like the church communities, because I grew up here as well. I wasn't raised in any church, but I was lucky enough to have parents that wanted me to be educated. So like I went to sessions at every type of church.
Oh, nice.
And especially now that I'm over my like kid phase and out of my mid-20s, I'm noticing no matter what religion you are, or if you're not, the most beautiful thing about it is that community you're talking about, where, don't get me wrong, there's bad seeds everywhere. There's bad seeds and good things. So there's bad things that can happen anywhere, anytime, any place. But one of the most beautiful parts about that is you're less lonely, and you're able to build bonds, and you're able to socialize, and you're able to group think, and you're able to
group think isn't necessarily a good thing, but I know what you mean.
Not all the time.
Yeah.
But like you're able to pull multiple sources of
Right.
opinions, data,
Yeah.
whatever you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying to achieve an evil thing, then
Right, that's where the group think comes, like, scary. But I know what you mean, though. It's like there is an in the flock, in the fold, in the church kind of feeling, and then there's definitely an outside of the flock and fold kind of thing, and whether it's always good or regardless of whether it's good or bad, like we humans kind of need that sort of thing. So, yeah.
okay. And so you're going through that. You go to college, and then you leave college. You leave that college, and what happens for you after you do that?
Well, that's when I got involved with the nonprofit that I worked with for over a decade. And the first thing that I did there is I created an arts program that was kind of hoping to do kind of what we're talking about, kind of on these lines of just like a general inviting community. And the idea was, and is, it's still running, like it's now has a few locations throughout the state. But the idea is it's kind of like it's basically a show and tell for visual artists. So if you're a painter, a photographer, or a sculptor, or et cetera, anything that's like a physical object, I guess, you just bring it out to this event at this time, and that's basically it. It's just a 2-hour long show and tell for adults. And I don't necessarily like to describe it that way because it sounds like it's
Overly simplified.
And maybe kind of that's the way to say it. But it doesn't matter if you're like a third grader doing a show and tell or you're 80 doing a show and tell. Like, you're always creating, and you need to show people the stuff. It's like it's not juvenile. It's not simple. It's like maybe we think of it as simple because we did it in elementary school, but we all need to show the stuff that we care about. I mean, Instagram proved that like a decade ago. We just all have to show things all the time for some reason.
So it's basically a pop-up gallery. I
think
so to speak.
Pop-up. Yeah, the thing is, like, I always thought of the term pop-up when thinking about it. So I'm with you on that. But pop-up, I think, it refers to a different type of thing. But I'm not. Yeah, it is pop-up, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Are those types of things always in the same location, or did you alternate the locations?
We tried to what I tried to do is set up like a location and stick to that location, and then once I found like a partnership in another place, we'd open up a different one.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, we were able to keep the locations pretty static. So I don't know if that, for me, that was fortunate because I always thought of it in terms of like scaling it. But yeah, they were always kind of in the one location, unless we had to, like, for a broader reason, like move a location or something.
Yeah, you had to find another
Yeah,
option.
like we moved or something. Yeah.
Okay, and so why art? Is that like a personal thing you're passionate about, or was it out of necessity because it was accessible to the maximum amount of people? Like, why art?
I think for me, it's. I started that sentence without really having an answer. I was just going to launch into it.
Yeah.
I like. Well, I guess it's it's something that I haven't really intellectualized too much. I think it's just, it can be more honest and more diverse than, I mean, I feel like this is an honest dialogue, but I think that art can sometimes go a little bit more intimate or a little stranger, or it can take people to places that's maybe a little harder to get in conversation, or we wouldn't feel comfortable if we did. I don't know. I think there's just like a sincere aspect to it that I think is, there can be a sincere aspect to it that I think is very valuable. And maybe a more concrete answer is I went to a charter film school my last couple of years of high school, and it was all about filmmaking. And it was just, I felt like it was a big transformative experience for me. So it was like, how do I replicate this in other forums? And painting, as opposed to filmmaking, painting was like easier in my mind to set up like a pop-up style show and tell event, because just the economics are different. You can show 50 paintings in one night. You can show maybe 6 short films in an hour. So
Yeah, and then the cost of creating films compared to the cost.
definitely, yeah.
Painting is expensive.
For sure.
I'm not degrading any painters, but like the cost of camera equipment and
Yeah, it's just very different economics.
yeah, so it's more accessible to more people, and
Yeah.
you have a passion for art.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then so your journey went from being in college to going to this place for a decade, and now you're trying to take a next step, or what caused you to make a pivot?
So I had been kind of formulating my this current project since, like I said, about 2014. So the nonprofit that I worked at, I helped kind of build. So I kind of came into it at a very exciting time in the organization, and I was able to have more freedom with that organization than I would have if I would have like worked at like kind of more like a legacy organization that's been around since the 70s or something. Like, I came in like after the organization had been around for maybe 8 years, and it was very kind of experimental, very had a lot of moxie. You know, it wasn't. It was kind of what you would expect like an arts nonprofit to be a little bit if it was run by actual artists, because that was the thing, is this was run by actual artists. So I came on with the organization, you know, when it was growing, and so it was very kind of scattered, very kind of all over the place. It's since become much more formal, much more rigid, and rigid is not the right word. It's become more formal. It's become more like a proper organization should be, is the right way to say it. But so while I was helping kind of administratively with this organization, running this arts program, I was also kind of thinking broadly about things outside of the arts, because the arts, I think, are at the center of society, and we could talk about that if it's relevant, but it's not the only part of society. So, yeah, so about 3 or 4 years ago, it just seemed like kind of a good fit for me to leave that organization. A lot of the art program that I was telling you about, I really had the sense that it was kind of operating successfully without me. So, yeah, it just seemed like kind of a good time for me to focus on some of the things that I wanted to do. And, yeah, I mean, I wanted to do kind of most of what I did, but I wanted to branch off a little bit, and there's a good juncture for that. So,
Okay. Do you feel like part of it that made it fun for you is being able to trailblaze, or like the adventure of it?
yeah, I think it's very. I think it's very exciting to do that. That's where it kind of makes sense to me. I like doing simple things. I like I've worked in all kinds of jobs. I've been a janitor, for example, and I love that to absolute. I love that job, but I also like to see new things created. I like to see. I like to see ideas tested out in actual organizational structures. That's a really difficult thing to do, and I'm becoming less proficient at it because I'm getting older and more tired. But when I'm young and dumb and ready to just try things out, it's just what I wanted to do. So
It helps you test your perspective. I feel like.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
making decisions on a multi-tier level that affect multiple things is like probably one of the funnest things that I do. Is you have to be able to project out and think of variables that could get in the way and then find solutions for them.
yeah,
And one of the things I try and tell everybody that I mentor or that I coach is like, life's not about how boring the task at hand is. It's about the adventure that you're going on while you're doing it. So like, I feel that happens a lot in our society as we get stuck in, like you were saying, more static roles that you can't move in. Not saying rigid, not saying it's impossible.
That was a bad word. Yeah.
Well, no, like, because I was gonna say it, and then I remembered that you were like, that's probably not the right word, and I agree. Like, right? Like, my vocabulary could probably be better, but like, I feel like people get locked into an area that, while you're learning something, if you're the right type of person, it's fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
once you stop learning, I feel like that's what steals people's youth from them, because they get bored.
Yeah.
Unless they
Yeah,
truly love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a cool reason for you to try and pivot to try and pave another path, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I kind of, as you're talking, though, it's making me wonder, because, again, I have like a sincere admiration for the fact that you can do something like this. I mean, the fact that you want to have like philosophical dialogue on top of it is really cool, I think. But I also really like that you're franchising out, and so you're kind of, when you initially said, you know, are you testing out, it's a way to test out your perspective. When you were expanding, this is a question for you because I'm curious if you don't mind, but when you were expanding, did you hit up against a lot of like people who wanted you to tweak your model beyond where you wanted to, you know, change it? Did you have like people who were questioning your brand or giving you just like, I mean, I'm vaguely speaking from experience, but I'm curious, like, industry crossover, like, what did you experience with that sort of thing as you were expanding?
Yeah, so one of the first, I think one of the hardest parts is, which you probably know with being with an organization in its younger stages, is those first few years is you're running at the wall and hitting your head, and you're running at the wall and you're hitting your head. But then you start taking notes, like, okay, this was right, but this was flawed. And as you go down that road, you start to realize, like, the things that worked and the things that didn't work. Mm-hmm. And it's not meaning that it wouldn't work for someone else, but in a specific chain of events, you know the outcome because you've done it yourself already.
Yeah.
And you run into a lot of people questioning you based off your initiative, based off your motives, based off of their opinion of what's possible. And I feel like I ran into that problem a lot during our first shop. And then when we got to the second shop, we knew enough that we had to change.
Yeah.
So then we pivoted and, like, experimented in that second shop and took notes of that. And the whole time people were like, you guys can't do that. It's not going to work. You guys are too young. You can't build that way. And then as I've gotten more and more repetition of dealing with more and more people, I realized that there's a stigma in our industry specifically where the owners have to operate, meaning they have to be behind the chair.
They have to be the barbers, I guess?
Yeah, or they don't respect you. And that's not all barbers, but it's fairly common.
Okay.
And I don't cut behind a chair anymore. And I noticed that when I was younger, I allowed people's opinion to manipulate my belief. And then when I went with my gut, I was able to actually help those people even if they didn't believe in me more. And it tested my courage to be able to make a decision and watch it play all the way out and then pick up the pieces if it didn't work, because the only time you fail is when you quit. So it really was interesting to see, because now on our 4th location, like, it's weird. I have all these random facts in my head about businesses that, like, I know for a fact if you go into a service or even with your trash pickup, right?
Mm-hmm.
This applies if it's daily. So
Daily? Okay.
daily, right?
Sure.
Yeah, in air quotes. So say you're doing a trash pickup from 5 to 7.
Okay.
Because everybody gets off work between 3 and 7. If you're there every day, the first day you might get 1. The second day you might get 0. But after 3 months, you'll get 3. Because you're always going to get 1 a day on average. But if you get someone to return, it doubles. And
the whole number doubles.
The whole number doubles. And in like the service industry specifically, everything runs in 3, 6, and year-long cycles. So in 3 months, people know who you are now as long as you're not shy. In 6 months, people understand and are coming back, and people are like recommending you. And then within a year, if you're doing it right, people trust you, they're recommending you, and you're getting new people. And I feel like that works in any business dynamic as long as you're able to generate new people. Not even just a business, like even with like a community thing. Like the first...
Yeah, I'm seeing the crossover, yeah.
Yeah, the first time we pay out of pocket for Santa to come to all of our locations because everybody's charging people money to take pictures with Santa Claus, and that just seems weird to us.
I don't think Santa would like that.
Right? But the first year, slow. Okay, the second year, everybody knew Santa was coming. So then what happens the third year? It doubles again. And I think one of the biggest things I learned was like, okay, so a lot of people are really worried about their own personal perspective. They're not understanding that, like, yeah, the turnout didn't happen how you imagined.
Right, yeah.
Like, it didn't go the way you imagined. But if you take the data from what actually happened, did it go well? And so I feel like that's a lot of what I do in business now. Instead of being emotionally driven, I'm able to step more back and not take things personally and be like, okay, another air quote. Yeah. I'm going to shoot to do $3 million.
I like air quotes. I just didn't know why you were air quoting around daily.
Yeah, because like
I guess it depends. Like
for you, like I'm not expecting people to think that you're
you're going to be there daily. The logic applies. In your case, it was daily. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I've noticed if you can be patient, it's science. Like so, you have to go through the scientific method to understand if anything worked, because everything's a theory.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you have a theory, then finish it. And then you'll know if it's a theory or fact. And so, I think that's really underappreciated. Like, people get really defeated, or they... A lot of people don't even start.
Yeah, I think that's terrific. And that particular last point has many crossovers with what I do. Because one of the big metrics, of course, is like turnout, like how many people showed up to your event. And, you know, the rule of thumb is like the more people that show up, the better it is. And, you know, I guess I can see why, you know, if they're buying tickets or buying a service, you know, at some point, I guess, I don't know, I maybe have to face the music at some point, but I mean, we are all bound by monetary rules in that regard, but I mean, like, I guess what I'm getting at is like, it's really about the quality, not the quantity. Like if you have and this is just my version of what you've already said, which is, you know, if someone comes out and they have a great experience, and it's a real experience, and you meant it, and everyone had a good time, and they could see that you enjoy being there in whatever capacity you're there, that attracts people. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Like I imagine if I went back and combed through my very slow start, because I'm kind of the shy person that you described. Like I like this discussion, but I'd rather, you know, be making screenplays or something. But unless I've allocated time to talk, and then I appreciate the opportunity. But if I were to go back and look at the stats, I'm sure I would see some kind of correlation between if I just showed up and held the door open for people, then I would see an incremental, you know, improvement in the averages. In fact, I know that's the case because I've been crunching the numbers lately. But
Yeah, and then on top of that, sometimes 100 people's worse than 25.
oh, for sure,
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like if it's the wrong
yeah,
crowd or if it's the wrong group, then why is this so hard? Okay, so
yeah,
if you had a scale and you weighed how much trash you did every time, there's variables because there's going to be different amounts of trash every time depending on how many birthday parties, how many right?
Was
But
there construction there recently, et cetera? Yeah.
But if you weighed or counted the bags and you were like, okay, this time we had hot chocolate,
Mm-hmm.
this time we didn't,
Yeah.
but if we did hot chocolate 4 times, more families
That's more
showed up,
advanced than what I've thought about. Yeah, but I'm sure that's true.
right? Like if you create like if you go on Google Maps and create like a treasure hunt
Mm-hmm.
of where you, because you're frequenting these places, if you create a treasure hunt of like where you know the trash builds up the most,
Yeah.
and then you make it so you're, like you were saying, playing on the gaming and
Mhm.
like the gamification is
Yeah.
like, okay, so if I did that or I just let people roam the park, do people leave faster? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the gamification, I've put it a little bit on the back burner because what I have to do is like I have to have like the biggest vision possible, and then this might be true of every human being on the planet, but then I have to find like the one entry point that makes sense to me and what I can reasonably do with energy, resources, team, that sort of thing. And then I try to like roll out of that. So for me, the easiest thing to do is just have like a straight up trash pickup day, because it's harder, I think, to make maybe this won't be the case for younger generations, but it's harder to make the appeal that with a gamification, it's like you also have to educate a lot of people about what's going on. And then, you know, you might have a kid who's into gamification, but, you know, maybe someone who's older that really won't enjoy it. They might find it pandering or something, because I kind of had both minds about it, but the trash pickup just seems to be like a universal, like anyone and their dog knows what a, you know, trash pickup is. You know, you can, and it's very easy to write like a grant proposal around that sort of thing, or go like solicit donations for it, or, you know, get board members around that kind of thing. So, but the gamification stuff, I fully believe, and have some, like we've done like little trial things with like actual gamification, like kind of like in a test tube kind of thing, like in a lab. Like we got people together and we ran little like experiments where we dialed things like crazy, like figuring out like what can you actually do if you have full control of the rules around this kind of thing. But that kind of got put on the, like I said, on the back burner for like 5 or 6 years. But for sure, like once you're able to like see the system from like a Sim City perspective, and you can, you know, like see all the ins and outs and when things come in. And actually, that's one of the things that drives me, because I didn't complete that thought correctly. One of the big concerns that I have is foreign countries, governments, huge corporations narrowing people into these games without the consent of the people, because these games are so effective that you can do virtually anything and people won't be able to realize it until like several generations in. You know, they talk about like smart cities, they talk about like smart cities, they talk about there's like I'll just say it, like the World Economic Forum, you know, foreign actors who I'm sure they're smarter than I am on virtually every possible metric, and I'm not being sarcastic, they probably are, and I'm sure that they have good intentions, but they're not local people, and so it doesn't matter how smart they are or how good their intentions are, they shouldn't have the right to dial in our cities without, like, we can do it. We're more than smart enough. Anyone is smart enough to do this kind of thing. You just have to have, like, you have to just be able to see the spreadsheet. You just have to be able to see the game board. That's all it really takes. And so that's one of the things that drives me is, can we gamify our communities? This is the real game. Can we gamify our communities before the foreign actors can, is my thing.
Yeah.
That's the real test of time.
Well,
I didn't say that right, but you know what I mean.
No, you're completely right. Like, the scariest part is, so my girlfriend has a really strong opinion about social media and phones. And
is it for or against?
Against.
Me too, hey.
And I agree, if you're not capable of discipline, because I completely watch it. So I'm on the end of utilizing the software to play the game.
Yeah.
I'm not in the game.
Yeah.
So what I've noticed that's really scary with any social media platform is they've dialed it in. It's brainwashing. And if you're aware, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
If you're aware that this is designed to please you and get out of you what they want, whoever it is, then it's fair if you're educated on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think a lot of people are extremely educated, especially like with
Right.
what you're saying. So like,
well, half of their design is assuming that people don't know what's going on. They're not assuming that people are in on this game.
exactly. And
They're assuming that they don't care or won't have the time to care, and that's
it's the same with, so yeah, like with the group you were speaking of, there's other financial groups that they make huge decisions based on the fact that some people don't understand how credit cards work.
yeah.
Like, at all. They weren't born into a family that had a credit card, or they couldn't get approved for a credit card, or their credit was already shot. So they grew up their whole life, and they have no idea that you even have to pay monthly on a credit card. Yeah, you can print out a 20-page
Right.
like document that they had someone sign, but because of every app on your phone making you sign a contract, people have stopped reading.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what's scary is your financial system is determined by a specific group of people. Your housing is determined by a specific group of people. And then your rules are determined by a specific group of people. But then the scary part is the crossover. So, like, our government was initially designed with branches to be able to mitigate that exact type of thing.
Yeah.
But now, big money has its fingers in all of it.
Yeah.
And that's not to vilify big money.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, because I went through like a huge anti-money, like I still like Ron Paul, but when I was like, do you know who Ron Paul is?
I remember the name. I have no idea.
His whole thing was like end the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
You know, end the central bank in the United States that prints money. And I was very into that. And the reason why I was into it is because I had never heard of it. I learned about the three branches of government. I learned about the local politics or the local government. I learned about the state government. I learned about the federal government. I learned about, various, third world, first world. I didn't learn anything about Federal Reserve. I didn't learn anything about central banks. And so it's like when you leave high school and suddenly no one's talking about local politics, and they're talking about how do you make money. It's like, why aren't we talking about money from the start? And why is like the most important institution not talked about? And so I've kind of come around to a sense that, and maybe what you were saying kind of implies that this is kind of where you've gotten to as well, but it's not about vilifying these monetary institutions. It's about understanding what role they played in human history and where we're at now. Because if you look at like 15th century Europe, there is no standard monetary system. It doesn't exist. And people suffered for that, surely. But then you look at like 1980, and we all have like personal computers, and it's like a personal computer in 1980 can do all the calculations required to manage the monetary system of a local community. Like it's not the math that's complicated. It's just the technology just didn't exist.
And the nuance of how they do it.
Right, yeah, the expertise, the ability to know how to do it, and the trust. Because that's the other thing. Like it sucks, but it's also about trust.
Right.
So, so like I believe that, this is what the whole cryptocurrency experiment is. Can local groups create their own currency without collapsing and without devolving into total scam all the time? Because that's what would happen if people who were untrustworthy start making currency and they don't see like the long perspective. So, so I think it's important to not vilify, like you say, and just understand like what is this system. And maybe the reason why there has been a Federal Reserve for so long and why that's been a private institution is because that just so happened to be, at the time, the most technically efficient way to do it.
Right. Well, and I was lucky. So I was lucky enough. My grandpa was the youngest accountant ever in U.S. history. So I grew up around an accountant. And I thought everybody, like, understood. Like,
yeah, not at all.
Right? And so now that I'm a little bit older and I'm grown, I think it gave me a head start in I understand exactly what's going on. I just don't have any. And I think of it this way, and this could be wrong. Like, this could be purely opinion, not fact.
Mm-hmm.
I understand how it works and why it does what it does, but I also understand I haven't earned the amount to do anything.
Yeah.
So
that's a pretty responsible perspective. Yeah.
Right, because I get it. There's some corrupt things going on. But there's always corrupt things going on.
Well, the thing is, like, if you this is something that I tried to learn early on. If you really think that society is corrupt, go try to start a business, go get involved in a nonprofit at administrative level, and you'll begin to see when you start to drop the ball, when not you, but when one starts to drop the ball, when one starts to get lazy, when one starts to blame, and you'll begin to see why things look a certain way, because there's, for sure, things can improve. Like, for sure, society can improve. For sure, there's corruption. Every paranoid feeling you have, I believe, points to something that needs to be addressed. But the system looks the way it does for relatively logical reasons in many cases.
Yeah, and I do think, especially in big metropolitan areas or huge cities. So it's really, I look at it in if you look at Rome, right? There were markets, there were gladiators, there were different there were different economies based off different things throughout the whole thing. And if you really close your eyes and you look at the perspective of the world right now, it's just bigger. It's the same thing it was back then, other than we have technology to help us with medicine, with education, with all of that. And that can be used good or bad. But it makes you realize, so when when our grandparents were here, there wasn't Costco.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, does Costco have some bad practices in the fact of how much profit they make? Yes, but 3.4 million people in Utah have access to go somewhere and
Right.
get goods.
Well, it's a negotiation. Like, should there be a Walmart in every neighborhood? Maybe not. But should there be no Walmart?
Probably not.
Probably not in a society as large as what we have. I mean,
In a rural area, I totally get it. No.
right. Well, if they can sustain themselves, I mean, there's a way to structure it. It's like, just like, what is, like, there was a city in upstate California, Nevada City, and it was this very, I love the city. I wish, I'd love to go back, but it was basically a walking town, and they had set up these local regulations that just were for their city. That I believe it was the case that there was not going to be any box stores there. There's not going to be any chain stores there. It was all just going to be local. And I could be rose-colored glasses that just a little bit, but I think that was the basic idea, is that it was all local. And it's just like, that's great. Why not? If you have the social cohesion to do that, go do it, And if you have just like this walking town, but you also have to understand, like, to your point and to the point that we're talking about, is like, also look at the scale of civilization. Like, if our supply chain just collapses, those small towns are going to really struggle to maintain whatever they've created, because having that type of cohesion is a kind of a luxury.
Yeah.
And it's a luxury predicated on huge storehouses of surplus and resource, and that stuff. So exactly like you said, it's not that it can't be evil and that it doesn't go in the direction of corruption. It's that you also have to look at what the circumstance is.
Yeah, and especially, like, I think about it, like, in the perspective of, if a ratchet strap broke in the middle of nowhere, do you know how to fix it?
Not me.
If
look at me.
right? Like, if the building falls down, do you know how to frame it? To achieve true autonomy, you'd have to learn every skill, but
Right.
that's not real. Okay, but then at least two people have to know the skill, because if one's sick, and then
That's true, yeah.
and so
Right.
that's why I do think you should try and pursue the betterment of the generation before you. You should try and help the community. You should help build it. But you also have to master the game that's been laid before you for centuries. So
Yeah.
that's like one of my personal missions, is like, I don't want to be able to afford a yacht because I want a yacht,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to be able to resource enough money that if I had to get a yacht to do an expedition or to go save somebody, I'd be able to do it.
Yeah.
And
I think what someone does with their money is more or less up to them. Like,
Yeah.
That's like, for me, I just want to make movies. That's what I really want to do. Like, if I had $50 billion, I would create films, and then, to your point, layers of infrastructure around my ability to make films. Like, that's what I want to do. But the thing is, like, if one likes yachts like that, and I don't want to sound like I'm too much of an apologist, because I try to be a little bit punk rock, but truly, I'm not punk rock. I try to be, but truly, like, it doesn't matter as long as it's not bothering somebody
or hurting them.
or hurting somebody, or
I use that as an example because it's like those things are crazy expensive. It's not actually one of my dreams, but it's like
the thing is, I don't want to yacht shame you or anybody, and
No.
I don't want to not shame yacht shamers.
yeah.
Because it's like, because I think if someone comes over to my house and tells me how to spend my money, It's like, well, that's a fight. That is what happens. That ensues. A fight ensues after that. So
it's a definitely a sensitive and aggressive subject.
yeah, that's the thing. Is like, there's so many conversations that have to be had. Well, here's a question I have for you. So one thing that I recently have put together is a petition against humanoid robots.
Okay.
And I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
I'd love to.
okay. So the thing is, like, I'm as nerdy as anybody. Like, the idea that you could create a humanoid robot is cool. I'd like to have a humanoid robot. Everybody wants to have a humanoid robot. Not everybody, but I think they're cool. But the thing is, going to like what we're talking about, if you look at the scale of our society, and you look at the problems we're facing, and if you look at society as being very tenuous, and a lot of these skills about maintaining wealth and maintaining resource and maintaining infrastructure and all those things in many people's minds are on this kind of chopping block. Like, we don't want banking, we don't want resource infrastructure, we want everything local. As to how many people are actually saying that in a credible way, I don't know, but I think there's a sentiment that society needs to crumble among some people, not among necessarily people that I talk to, but you kind of hear it, and there's a sentiment like eat the rich kind of thing. Well, my concern would be that these machines would be used to basically like create kind of a protection around resources in an aggressive way, and that things could go south. This is one of the concerns that I have. And the people who have something worth protecting are going to do whatever they have to do to protect it, including humanoid robots. And once you introduce humanoid robots into the discussion, it's pretty much game over for everybody. Because if you have a humanoid robot at your disposal, I don't care how moral the opposition is. I don't care if the opposition is smarter, dumber, whatever. If you have a humanoid robot, it's basically it's the Terminator.
And it will be used that way.
And it will be used that way because
It's
that's
not
how
that
we
it
would
won't.
all use it. If we had a tribe of people, we didn't know that they came by day, by night. We don't know if they would come in our house and terrorize us. We don't know if they would come. We would all resort to the best possible solution to keep them off of our back. If people are going to go tribal, then people are going to go for their guns. And if their guns happen to be Terminator, they're going to go for Terminator. So I think rather than create a circumstance where, and I know it might be simplistic, rather than create a circumstance where we are just relying on drones, relying on robots, relying on just the worst possible incarnation of our robotic infrastructure, we need to just try to have have an intelligent dialogue about the scope of the problem and what our systems are doing and what they're not doing, and try to educate people and not create this circumstance where we are relying on the Terminator in order to solve disputes. Because once you get that, I don't think you can unring that bell, because once you have the perfect solution to keep people from breaking into your house and terrorizing your children and your grandmother, once you have the perfect solution for that, you have no reason to not use it ever. It's like, so that's I have a petition. I'm friends with people who don't agree with that premise. I'm friends with people who really agree with that premise. And it's not necessarily about affluence. It's about seeing, try fist fighting a robot.
Yeah.
You will not win. I don't care how cool the robot is. You won't want to be on the receiving end of a robot.
No, and it's really logical. It's like, so for me, I'm aware at the extreme advantage I have to be able to use AI as a library because of where I was born, how my life turned out, and the fact that I can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is the free version, but like it still costs electricity, it still costs Wi-Fi, and then I'm able to afford the paid version. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and to go off of that subject, so I was really disappointed to see how we're using like DJI style drones.
What's DJI?
So like the little, like I have a drone in my truck that has a camera on it, and it's this big,
Mm-hmm.
and you could fly it anywhere. And I saw some really gruesome footage of how they're using them in combat to carry like grenades and bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I get it. Everybody's morals are based off where they were born and how their life went, and like your moral compass is different based on where you're from. It is. But there should be a universal understanding that flying a robot at somebody and blowing it up just isn't okay. And so like,
It's just such a bad strategy on all levels.
because okay, you're
There's
all
maybe like one level where it's the strategy, but all other levels
it's not okay. Like, I get it. It has a purpose. It's a tool. We're going to use it. But, like, you're already making people fight over something I get they believe in, and they've admitted that they're, like, going to have combat, right? But to use a robot and being able to actually disconnect and feel like it's a video game that you're playing. It's the same thing to say about your autonomous robots. Like, that allows you the freedom to look through here.
Yeah.
And if you're looking through here, it's not the same as if, like, I'm looking you in the eyes and I'm, like, able to determine, okay, this person's stressed. This person's acting different. This person's a threat. I can tell by their twitching. I can tell. And
That's
leaving
caffeine, by the way. That's not because I'm nervous.
Yeah, no. But I'm and honestly, I didn't even see a twitch. But like the physical cues to allow you to understand someone is an actual threat
Mm-hmm.
can't be felt through a screen as well as in person. So being able to automate your defense is a really realistic fear, where then there's the opposite, where it's like, okay, so I this is the Egyptian library, ChatGPT and whatever AI you use that is like able to spit out information to you. That's the lost Egyptian library. You're able to basically ask it logical questions, and not only that, you can train it to teach you and be your partner, not to do tasks for you. But so why aren't we using that? Why don't you drop a robot in the why are we worried about commercializing it to let people have them at their houses? Why aren't we fixing a problem? That's such
an interesting one, because my okay, so the thing with it's kind of like the trade-off, I guess. So I feel like if I had nothing else to do except like go Henry David Thoreau and go to the wilderness and just be by myself and live off the land, I feel like I would have at least a handful of novels in me,
Okay.
but nothing to do. But if I were to utilize like ChatGPT and I just came up with like outlines for 12 different novels, I could have like, in theory, I could have like 12 books in a day. Probably less, just depending on how quickly I could punch in my outlines and how much I wanted to process it. So I guess for me, it's like, or for anyone, I guess anyone having this kind of quandary, I guess, is like, am I willing to go to the grave with stories untold, or have everything told via AI?
Okay.
So maybe that's one reason why I like art. And I guess the reason why I bring that up in the context of what you're saying, I think, is like, why do we use AI for this? I don't even like the term AI. Why do we use that technology for this, for that, for the other? And I think what it will come down to is, like, are we willing to put up with mortality and physical limitations, or are those things intolerable, you know?
Okay.
So you talk about, like, should it be in our houses, or should it be out with exploration, or, you know, various fields? And I think it'll chase back to, am I willing to be a mortal
Or not.
who's going to break when a robot punches me in the head, you know?
Okay.
Or will I engage in this arms race and become a humanoid robot so that I can keep pace with not only the technology, but those people who are pioneering the technology and who are standing behind it and making themselves superhumans with the technology, even though they're just humans, you know, like the Wizard of Oz guy, the Oz.
Yeah.
So that's why I bring that up, because I feel like it's going to be chased back to that. But
Because of all the variables of just how human beings are, yeah.
yeah.
And okay, because for me, I'm being devil's advocate, even though I kind of agree with what you said about your petition. I'm like, I would definitely put limitations on where they're allowed, and I would probably do what I was saying, like exploration or humanitarian purposes. It's too dangerous to go into that nuclear facility, and it's about to blow up. You should probably send that in there.
I mean, do I want to go work in an Amazon warehouse for 12 hours a day for years on end, or have a robot do it?
Yeah.
I think here's the thing with that is, like, would I want to do that as my entire career? No. Would I be interested in doing that, like, sincerely for a week or two just to have the experience? Sure, I think that'd be interesting. Like, I think that manual labor is very healthy, but I think that you could construct society so that it's compartmentalized. I think you could construct society culturally so that people can trade off roles on a more kind of a less back-breaking kind of basis. Like, you don't necessarily have to do back-breaking work your entire life. Like, I just think there's just, like, more interesting solutions, because, like, the robots, they were, like, designed by people who are highly intelligent, much smarter than I am, and I couldn't do that, because I don't like math in that kind of way. But it's such a catch-all solution. Like, why don't you have a robot that can do everything? Okay, but what if you tried to, like, think more creatively about how society is structured? Like, maybe you don't have to have a camera on every street corner in order for people to trust one another enough to not steal from one another. Like, it's not like you have to resort to these things because they are there. It's like, okay, well, what are other things you can do that help humanity that aren't just, like, you know, cut off their heads? Like, what is, you know, this solution that's just so perfect in every possible thing? Like, not everything has to be a robot.
Yeah.
In this example. So
No, I totally agree. I think this is my opinion on it. I think that bandwidth for society, or that technology, should be used for growth or education. So, like, not the autonomous robots, but, like,
my thing is, like, and I put this in a post, is like,
yeah,
let's just wait 100 years, figure out what we're doing, and then think about
that.
The C-3PO is on every street corner world. But can we just figure out, like, really,
like, education of the human being?
Yeah.
Like, I agree. Like, I think so. My hardest time growing up was I'm not highly educated in a traditional sense, but I'm highly educated, like, on my own journey of education, because I like learning.
I think you're a pretty practical dude, a very smart dude.
Thank you. I really like our conversations, because I really like your educated viewpoint and your opinion on it. And so, like,
lots of opinions.
but everybody has opinions, and it's good to voice them. It's like, what scares me is, my hardest time growing up was in school. I was too. I don't like to say smart, because I don't think that's the right word. I was too good at absorbing the information too fast that it couldn't keep up with me. So
It'll take me half a second to process that.
yeah.
Okay. I think I understand.
So for me, when I'm able to interact with a technology that's faster than me, it allows me to learn because it's faster than me. So it allows me to learn. And I could go to universities and sit with professors and sit with, like, this is part of why I wanted to do this podcast, is I want to talk to as many interesting people as I can because I like making myself think.
Yeah.
And so with what you're saying is, it's like, why don't we focus on letting people learn the passion of achieving things and building skills with our technology, instead of, like you're saying, have an end-all, cure-all, get fat, sit on the couch, eat potato chips, and let the robot do it.
Yeah, he just patrols your house for you.
And you don't even got to go to work. You can pay $30,000 and you can send that robot to go do the work for you, and you can get paid for it.
Yeah.
And so I do agree in that aspect of, like, I think the way technology is going is terrifying, but it's everything I dreamed of when I was a kid, on the fact that I can learn. So when I see the drones, I'm like, that could happen to us, like, tomorrow.
Oh, for sure. Oh,
like,
yeah.
like that could happen, like, really easily.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah,
it's not that hard to
south
buy.
very quickly.
Yeah, it's not hard to buy 1,000 drones. Like, if you have money and you want to do something like that, like, that's not that hard.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's, like, okay, but the fact that if Einstein were alive and he had ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting, because I don't know if this is true or not, but I've understood that when he was on his deathbed and the doctor was going to perform some kind of surgery or some kind of a procedure, basically use modern technology to augment his life and hopefully make him live longer, he chose not to do it. He chose to not take that. So I know what you're saying, that, like, what if you take someone who's kind of, in a way, just kind of ahead of their society, and the society is creating the tools for them to become what they actually are and what they can actually. I understand that point, but I just, in nitpicking Einstein specifically, because I've actually thought, it's interesting you bring it up, because I've thought about that particular case. It's like he chose to not do that. He chose to just pass away
And let it be.
Yeah, and I've thought, like, would what would compel me to make that decision? What would I have to just not like life? Would I have to have loved my life? You know, like, what would it take for you just to age out and go? Because that might not even be a requirement in, like, 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, with nanobots, you know, we might live as long virtually as we want to, unless we trip and hit our head or something, whatever it is. But so that isn't you bring it up, Einstein, it just makes me think of that, like, because the thing is, like, I use technology, like, I use social, like, I reached out to you on social media. I've played around with ChatGPT. I don't rely on it for the bulk of what I do, but even, like, the free version, I think it's pretty nifty. So it's like, there goes my eye again. It's all the coffee I drink. I'm always drinking coffee.
I'm a fiend too, and it's
you Twitch.
Yeah, it's, but so yeah, like you're saying, and not even to augment them, but like, so imagine the world's best mathematician being able to not be the best and play. So, like,
I'm not sure I fully understood.
So
imagine him not being the best,
because the computer is going to be better. So
I see. Yeah.
So, like, the equations that these men did when they had to do them on a whiteboard or with chalk or with paper.
Yeah.
Imagine being able, like, how much more they can achieve in their lifespan with the assistance. Now, that's terrifying because speaking of Einstein, he helped make the nuclear bomb,
Yeah.
which is absolutely
That's where his brain.
terrifying.
Yeah.
So
He probably wasn't
pleased.
thrilled with that,
But so imagine if we use the gift the right way, this is a theoretical, and we actually progress society to be better because you can learn faster,
yeah.
then that's the one thing I love about it, that I've preached about it the whole time, is, okay, so you're scared of people using the technology to do something bad, but that same technology can solve what they're doing bad. And then it's always going to be the balance of good and evil.
Yeah.
So what happens when you get the most bright minds with the right cause to use the best tool?
Yeah.
Because, we haven't even figured out we haven't even truly figured out how pyramids happened. There's tons of theories, there's tons of data, there's tons of different things. But, okay, so one of the theories is sound, right? So
I haven't heard that theory.
yeah, so they used sound to make the blocks lighter so the people could lift them, right? So at what point do we start being like, okay, so the world's best biologist is trying to understand why everything's depleting so fast, and they need to finish this math problem or this this equation, or they need to ask it questions, because everybody in the world is feeding it information at once.
Yeah.
Of, okay, out of the database that you know in the Amazon rainforest of everything we found, this similar item or this similar plant was found with these similar characteristics. What genre of plant is this? And then you're able to access knowledge that was lost. So there's tribal things that we used to do that are lost, not because they weren't valuable, because they never got passed to the next person.
Yeah.
So you can reverse engineer things, and you can learn, and you can teach people, and that's the one thing I do like. I pay attention to my employees, and I write down the characteristics of how I'm teaching them and what's working and what's not. And then I'm able to ask it, based off of this, how should I help this person better?
Fascinating. Okay.
And
have you tried that?
Yeah, so I ran a 6-month experiment where I did
That's cool.
coaching with every employee for an hour. And I recorded them all, and then I transcribed them and put them into ChatGPT, and I was like, how do I help this person more? And then they all increased by 200% in their productivity. So it's okay, so if you do that with healthcare, this person has these conditions and is doing this and is eating this diet, and you implement it, and you're based on your knowledge that you have provided in your system, as long as the knowledge isn't flawed or skewed by someone's prerogative, then you can start diagnosing people and helping them with their habits instead of with medication. So this person every morning wakes up, drinks 2 cups of coffee, doesn't drink water until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and never eats fruit. And then they're so lethargic through the day that they never work out. Okay, my suggestion would be wake up, drink 1 glass of water, 1 cup of coffee, eat a banana, and then walk to work, because your work is this far away. And then your exercise for the day is done to keep you at an optimal health.
Yeah.
And that's the type of stuff that I couldn't do before, because the work is so tedious.
Yeah. Boy, that's such. I think it's fantastic you did that. I mean, I guess that's what it kind of goes down to, is like the tedium of it, and what does it mean to optimize something also. One thing that comes to mind, and you kind of hinted on this, I think, a little bit towards the end, but it's like you said that in that particular example of you running that experiment, it would have been too tedious to do it, but I think you technically could have done it.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe it was because that you had, I mean, would you say, or would it be accurate to say that because you had this phenomenally cool technology that was right there with you at every pace, and it was doing a lot of like real work for you, it was, you set the intention, you brought everything together, but it was like a really advanced secretary, like you knew where you wanted it, like you were doing it, but it was like, do you think that it was because it was so accommodating to you that it enabled you to be interested in that process? Because the thing you described, I think, is what maybe a someone in the past might have done, but they would have done it like, I mean, they didn't do it because it was tedious, and those that did it were college professors who were just doing it in theory,
Yeah.
for no, and the people who actually ran the businesses didn't have the time to do it because they were running the business. So is that part of it? Because it was there that
It allowed me to use what I knew like would benefit everyone, and it made something that was impossible because of the financial and it would have taken me probably 20 people to like do that, because like either I quit running my company and I do that for 10 years to be able to write down all the data, then sift through it, then organize it in a spreadsheet.
Become your own consultant.
Yeah, and so like I use it to basically make me smarter. And the only thing I didn't like about the experiment is it taught me how easily you could manipulate people with it.
Oh yeah.
Because I let them know, like, hey, I'm gonna upload this.
I wasn't gonna call you out in case you didn't, but I think that's good that you did that.
Yeah, I let my people know. I was like, hey, so I'm building a course out of what we do. So I'm recording everything and I'm transcribing it, and then I'm putting it into ChatGPT, and I'm telling it based off what I taught you to write a course so I can pass this to the next person. And then I would go over that same sheet that it generated with the next person. I'd record that conversation, and then it would add to it. And then I did that for about 6 months.
Okay.
And it made like an 8-week marketing course that like dove into like step by step how to like
a marketing course?
Yeah, like grow your business or grow your
I must have faded out. Weren't you
ecosystem.
talking about the experiment that you?
Yeah, but that's the experiment I did. Is like I met with my employees every week for an hour, and I talked to them about what was going on with them and how they could get busier and how they could do better at their job. And then at the end of it, I took all the data from each week, and I would come up with the next week's segment, and then I would read over it with them, and then I would have it adjusted again, and each time they increased by like an astronomical level.
I was just curious where the marketing part, but okay.
Well, the basis of the experiment was I have to teach 40 people how to market themselves a little bit better for their life to be better because they'll make more money.
Okay.
And so I used it with my knowledge to record my knowledge and then make it actually simpler for people to understand.
Well, one question I have with that is, say that you went through this, you did the process exactly like how you did it, and then you brought on like someone who was a consultant, and they were just like totally up for the experiment. Would you? And I have opinions, but what would you be willing to have a consultant do it if the money worked out the same, and if you felt like the consultant was trustworthy, to have them do for you what the machine did? Or are you just completely sold on that?
I think it's impossible for a consultant to do it in the same economic way.
Well, putting that aside, like say
Okay,
that
so if it were
it's
the
all-
same, the
all
same.
all the same. Just this is a hypothetical. Like,
Sixes.
I'm not gunning for like a nephew or something.
Yeah, so like sixes. If it were like sixes across the board.
Mm-hmm. And the answer maybe no. I don't know.
No, I'd probably want to use a person.
You would want to use a person.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, okay.
Because I don't think it has the right to take away people's ability to do. I only think it should be allowed to help people do.
But you also, to your point, you don't want to have your work impeded by like a team member who's just not really, who's kind of phoning it in, because that, we've all phoned it in at one point. You don't want to have something that's not cost effective. So what I'm wondering, and this kind of goes to some, there's so many things to talk about with technology, but I think it's fantastic you did that. But I guess I just kind of like pull it back to is like, it seems to me that just with the telegraph that was invented like 100 years ago, if no more, or the radio, just one of those two, the telegraph or the radio, something that enabled people to talk across continents relatively quickly, if no more technology had come after that, I feel like, and we had just built culture around that, we could have changed society 1,000 times over. But like the technology is changing exponentially, but the culture changes over centuries. I mean, I think it was like, are you familiar at all with Joseph Campbell at all?
No.
It's kind of an obscure reference, but he was like, he was into mythology and storytelling and why ancient cultures had certain motifs or styles in their stories. And he was, one of the things that I think that he brought up, it was like the sword, societies slowly absorbed the concept of a sword over hundreds, if not thousands of years into their storytelling, into their mythology. So you brought up like the tribes in the Amazon, how they would carry things over centuries and millennia and all that, and some things got lost and some things didn't. It's the same with like technology, like stories and mythology kind of like weave the technology into the society. And I bring up the sword because I think his point was that the sword was like the last technological advancement that was truly woven into the culture properly, where it was like having your sword is like a rite of passage. It's not just like something that Steve Jobs came up with one day and then somebody else came up with a better thing. It's like the sword, the idea of a sword was woven into the culture. So what I'm saying is like with like the telegraph, it would take us centuries to figure out how to weave that into our, maybe not now because we can think about it more with more self-awareness than maybe they were able to before because of our communication capabilities. But I just think it would take time to weave even the telegraph, let alone ChatGPT. So that's why I bring that up, is like, it's just I guess my default is, you say that you've used ChatGPT as a way to really streamline your business in a really cool way that I would be tempted to do that. Like I would do that if I really didn't want to do it. That doesn't make any sense, but I want to do it, but I won't probably. But so when I kind of will push back on you a little bit, is like, if you knew that someone had been through the rigmarole of trying to like be as efficient as a machine in a certain context, would that be preferable? Because I think that
I think it would.
I think it could be done. I mean, if someone was like, I'm just going to be your dutiful servant for like 6 months, and I will do whatever the crap you want. After that, you know, you can go fly a kite. But for that 6 months, I'll do whatever, you know, in the business that you want me to do. I feel like that might be preferable.
I think it would be because you're able to build a connection with somebody, and there's something nice about how that would work. I do see what you're saying. Like, if someone could, and there are people who can. There's like people who like are really, really, really good at what they picked to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, astronomically better than me, than anybody I know, at math or at pretty much anything. There's someone who's a genius in it. So I do think like there is something to be said about that. But I also know, as growing up with somebody who, I'm not a genius, but I am a little bit faster than most people, I think it allows the people who aren't as fast to level the playing field a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take a chess master against a novice, it's never going to be even.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, it allows them to at least have the tools that are the same as the person born with that gift. Not saying that the gift's not earned, because everything of, like, talent and skill is earned. But it allows, like, the average person who doesn't have access to a college to really dive into a subject. And I don't think you can ship one person to the middle of a tin town in South Africa and have them actually have all that data in a backpack, let alone in their head.
Yeah.
So I think that's the only hard part, is it's like, if there was someone who could recite every book in every college and teach every learning type bit, that would be always optimal. Because the human connection builds a different bond to what you're learning than anything else. It takes a special...
I believe that.
Yeah, it takes a special type of discipline to be a... What are they called? Like serial college goers, like the people that like they go to college for a living. They're I feel so bad. They're so smart.
I'm afraid
they're
like an academic or
yeah,
a professor?
Like an academic,
see,
right?
yeah.
So like that takes a super special type of discipline.
Yeah.
That like I don't think everybody is born with or can afford. So like being able to sit and concentrate. So today I sat and concentrated for 8 hours at my computer. But that's really hard to force yourself to do.
Yeah.
So I do think having a human being being able to be like, hey, do you see this flower? The reason it grows right here is the soil, and it's native to here, and the benefits it has is this, and then they can pick it up and eat it and then show you. Mm-hmm. That's invaluable.
Yeah.
Right? The reason the water falls right here is because the way the canyon's been carved, and the reason it's clean water is because it flows through the rocks and it filters it, and then they can show you that they drank it. That's overly valuable. But I also think leveling the playing field for education to like a kid who is a firstborn immigrant, like, so they're the firstborn American in their family and they're an immigrant, leveling the playing field of like, you can ask this phone, how do I catch up in education to kids that are 12 years in front of me because I just moved here and I'm 12? And it being able to give you a logical answer and you being able to respond to it and be like, I don't learn that way. And then it being like, well, how do you learn? Mm-hmm. That's a humanitarian thing in itself. I don't think it was intentional, but I do think it's like, that's the one thing I just don't know if it could ever happen that way, that easy, if the technology didn't get there.
Yeah, I think that's right. It
So
kind of reminds me when I was doing like the nonprofits, like starting like midway through kind of this project, and this is a particular point. is that I was thinking about it, and I was like, these huge corporations, they can do, technically speaking, far more than not only my nonprofit, but my nonprofit by 1 trillion times, but basically by every nonprofit, like the Amazon company. They can do more and do more. Just pure numbers alone and just infrastructure. So I think you brought up a very interesting point, and it's how that's reconciled, I guess, is, I don't know, but it's true. It's true.
But it's terrifying how new it is too, because a lot of people, like, I think a really weird way about it. Like, I know there's probably people who think like me about it, but everyone I talk to about how I think about it is like, I never thought of that. So
that kind of, because I was listening to a conversation with Jeff Bezos, and he was talking about how he set up his company so that it didn't make a profit for like X number of years. And after like a minute of, not a minute, like I didn't think about it, but it kind of came to me like what he was treating his for-profit company basically like a nonprofit, like any money that was coming in, that was on top of overhead, he just put it back, and he probably, raised overhead incrementally. But I mean, I think that's some of the strategy is like if you're just thinking about profit and you're not thinking about growing. I've started to think more about for-profit stuff with some of my other projects, but not fully. But yeah, I think if that's kind of where you're going at, I think that's like you're way ahead of the curve on something like that.
yeah, and I don't know. That was a really fun dialogue. Thank you. That was cool.
I agree. Thank you very much.
So we're about hour and a half, 2 hours in.
Oh man.
So
Was that?
we're at hour 40 minutes.
Yeah, that was very good. It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. So I kind of want to bring us back one more time and back away from the AI, even though we both are super interested in technology. And I would definitely love to like have you come back in a few months or a year and definitely plan some things with you that the barbershop can try and help inform the community about the events, and then we can try and partake it the best way we can, whether it's we send a few people out and they come with like rewards for people to come or whatever we can do.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because I really like that you're doing that, and it's super cool that you're doing two things at once. I think a lot of people don't understand that life's really short and it goes by really fast, and if you don't fill your life with things that are a little bit hard but they're really fulfilling, you're going to end up at the end of your life wondering why you didn't do certain things, or you might have some regret. You might not.
Mm-hmm.
But I really...
You got me thinking now.
Yeah, I really like that you're working on two passions at once, and I think that's really important in today's society, because a lot of people are just worried. I say a lot because not everyone, I don't know the math, but a lot of people are really worried about getting their monetary situation right. But for me, I've noticed that the more I do things passionately, the more monetary gain I get from them, instead of focusing only on monetary gain. Mm-hmm. And I feel better as a human being.
Yeah.
And I'm working on companies and doing podcasts, and
yeah, this is great.
Yeah,
I really, like I said it before, I admire this. I think that's pretty rare thing you're doing. I don't know of anyone that's doing that kind of thing. So,
thank you. And you're the first person I've ever gotten to talk to about like humanitarian work. So
I'm hardly the expert, but I'm kind of a plucky local fella, so that counts for something.
I like it. And let's remind everybody where they can find.
I go again.
You're good. Let's remind everybody where they can find your nonprofit and the dates. Is there a website or?
Yeah. So our website is gounite.xyz. I know that sounds like it's a fake URL, but it's real. Google, the Alphabet, the parent company of Google, they use it, so it's at least credible in that regard. gounite.xyz. That's our main website, and the homepage just lists the dates of our events. Like, that's the number one important thing about what we do is our events. That's the homepage. That's just the itinerary. And then below that, you can link through to our social media and stuff.
I love that. And then, do you have any videography or any movies coming out soon, or you're working on some things?
Yeah, I'm working on a little sci-fi series that right now I just it's a weekly social media thing on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. It's kind of a weekly reminders to use your phone less. So
I really like
on
that.
your phone, coming from your phone or straight to your face. So.
If people are interested in that, what could they find that under?
Actually, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know the handles right offhand. If
I can tag them below for people to go and check them out.
okay, that'd be good.
I'll have you send me the link, and then
Yeah, we do it.
that's really cool too. I would definitely love to have you come back if you're ever interested.
Sure.
We'll let some time go by, and we'll do some work together, and then we'll let everybody kind of
If they like the response. If they don't, then I will understand. I'm a professional in that regard.
Absolutely. Well, I like you, so I don't really care about their response.
I like it too.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sweet. Peace out, guys.